nuclear power plant. So how can you tell though? Notice that the average total cost function continues to fall and fall. It's not rising again. So they're achieving economies of scale by size, they're getting bigger. There's no way a whole bunch of small companies could have wired America. It's just too costly, right? Think about where you'd have to wire America for these services out, obviously in rural areas. Does that make sense, you guys? Okay, so that's what a natural monopoly is. And does that make sense now that economies of scale, that average total cost function in the long run is continuing to fall? So that's pretty easy if you notice that. And you know, I've got the function continues to slope downward with an increased quantity of one firm can produce 200 units, all right, at $10 more efficiently than two smaller firms could. These would be smaller firms, wouldn't they? Right? Economies of scale, when they haven't achieved that size. Does that make sense? And so, right, you can produce an output of 200 at a lower price. Everybody gets that. I've seen questions like that before, so that you guys can identify what a natural monopoly is. Everybody knows why they exist. All right, they have patent rights, they've achieved economies of scale. Sometimes it's Alcoa, like, I don't know if you know Alcoa. Does anybody know what Alcoa makes? They're the king of aluminum. And what they do is they control the resources, you know, at the bauxite level. They owned at one time 60% of all, and you said stock 60% isn't a monopoly, but they were so dominant that they could control price. So we already know this, correct? The demand curve would be downward sloping. Does everybody understand from yesterday then what this means right here? I showed you up here on the board. Everybody's aware of that? Mm-hmm. Good? Okay, does everybody understand why the monopolist then would want to produce in the what area? What area did we say? There'll be a question on the exam. They always want to, when I say what area, I apologize. In what section of the demand function, because I get rushed, in what section of the demand function, elastic or inelastic, would the monopolist want to produce in?
Elastic.
Because remember, their decision to produce, all right, more items, they're the only maker, is that they have to lower the price. And the only way that we can increase our revenue by increasing then our output, or I should say lowering prices, is in that elastic range. So this is going to be your inelastic range, and this is elastic. And then I showed you how to do that yesterday. Remember, if you have a graph, don't get alarmed by, well, gee, all right, this demand function is labeled as average revenue. Now, I forgot yesterday in my rushed manner to show you, all right, how we set that up with the demand function and create a marginal revenue function, that it also is average revenue. I should have showed you the math there. Okay, so just make sure that you're aware of those things so you don't make what? Dumb mistakes. You want to limit the dumb errors here. That's what we're trying to do. Okay. And you'll notice here, what else do we need to increase output, they must lower price. They face that demand function. So let's do this. Once again, not going to spend a lot of time on this. You know all the rules. It just shows you again here that they're going to maximize profits where, all right, you can either do the total revenue, total cost test. You can go through as they then look at their options in different outputs. Wherever then the total revenue, you can see that total revenue is climbing as we produce more, and it's going to. All right, but we want to look at then our cost of production and where we have the greatest difference. Same rules. Same rules with marginal revenue and marginal cost here. Okay? If you go through each one of these, you would notice that when we move from 3 to 4, we move from 2 to 3, you're going to notice that, all right, the 1 unit prior to the 5th item, all right, the marginal revenue is, I believe that's 102, and the marginal cost, okay, is 60. When we move to the next one, it's 82 and it's 70. No, you're saying stock, they're not even. You may get a tabular, all right, piece of information like this, not a graph. Does that make sense? So you may have to then determine, you know, what is the profit maximizing output if you're looking at a tabular form. Well, 82 certainly isn't equal to 70, is it? But notice what happens when we move to our next unit. Now the marginal revenue is 62 and the marginal cost is what? 80. We got to go back, don't we? Marginal cost exceeds marginal revenue, so you're going to go back to that earlier unit. Okay, I've seen that happen. They may not have total revenue, total cost information, but you have to go by marginal revenue, marginal cost. Just make sure that they might not always, we always say marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Make sure you go through step by step. If the marginal cost exceeds, you got to go back. All right. Oops, my apologies. Do this again here. Thinking that I'm on a PowerPoint. We've already discussed this. I showed you this yesterday. I don't think that I need to go through this again. And I set that up here, all right, on the board for you. All right. Just notice here, marginal revenue at some point will become negative. Right? When we set that up yesterday, that's where it crosses your x-axis, and that's where we turn from elastic to inelastic. So what is the profit maximizing output? We've already talked about it. That's why, here's the thing, you guys. Remember, we spent more time on pure competition. If you can do well with this, everything else lends itself to the other graphs and the other units of, or the other types of competition. You just have to remember, now you're looking at a downward sloping function, right? The monopolist raises prices. They might be the only maker of that good or service, okay, but you will go, all right, and find substitutes, okay? If electricity prices continue to rise, you don't have a choice to buy the electricity from anyone else, correct? But if it continues to rise and continue to rise, are you just going to go, all right, and find an alternative source? You buy a generator. You might be like Pop. You might put up what? Solar panels. They're the only maker of electricity. I can't go to anyone else. I'm stuck. But, all right, there are substitutes. It's just really limited. There's no substitute for electricity, but is there substitutes, all right, for other forms of energy? Yeah, so that's what you're doing here. Everybody knows how to do this now. All right? Not going to beat a dead horse to death here. You know how to find profits. You know how to find the profit maximizing quantity. You'll notice that this coincides with our tabular form that we had earlier. We were to produce the 5th unit, weren't we? Isn't that what it said here a second ago? All right? Does anybody see deadweight loss? It's really easy to see on this graph, so before I move on, I'd like to show that to you. Right? It's this triangle again. So we don't get a lot of the efficient types of pricing schemes and outputs, and we also see some deadweight loss here. And we're going to have to get to a point now where you guys can look at this. You can say, okay, stock, well, where would then we see a price in pure competition if we were to compare the two? Because they're going to want you to do that. All right? And so I will show that to you here in a second. Right? This graph is really, really easy. Okay, so they're showing profits. Now remember, with a monopoly, it's not easy entry, so we're not going to see a whole bunch of firms just, all right, jump in and get into this right away, are we? They're pretty much, I mean, the sole maker. That's why we call them a price maker. Okay? So let's go down here. Sometimes it's a question. You know, there is no supply function. Remember when we set this up for pure competition, we had that the price, all right, is the demand function is MR, and the market supply function is over here. Well, that doesn't exist. There is no market. The monopolist is the market. Okay? So, you're going to notice this is kind of cool here. All right? Since price is equal to marginal revenue with pure competition, each time the price is raised, there's a different quantity. Now, we don't see that with monopolies. Price is not equal to marginal revenue. It's not at all. Price is determined by MR equals MC, and so even though, you know, we have different, you'll notice we have different marginal revenue functions here and different demand functions, and our output doesn't change. With peer competition, all right, your output's gonna change every time with changes in price. But you can have changes in price here, can't you? And there's no change in output. There's none. So, you know, they have some simple questions like that at times. I think if you ever get confused, just draw yourself, all right, a little picture, because you can have some scratch paper. I think the other thing that you're gonna have to be aware of now, it's a timed exam. So when we get done here tomorrow, I'm almost gonna be able to finish this up. I think when we come back on Tuesday, I only have a couple things to go through with you, all right? So this weekend, you can start doing these items. You know, you might say, Stock, I'd like to have some practice tests. You need to start looking at timing. Now, I haven't had a lot of kids have problems with time on this. In fact, there's too much time. You have, I believe, an hour and a half, 90 minutes to do 80 questions. But some of the questions are going to be really easy, aren't they? And remember, if you can't use a calculator, it's going to have to be really simple math. But you need to start practicing that. So if I give you some practice tests and they're 60 questions long, you should try to do those, obviously within, you know, an hour to 70 minutes, right? Correct? So you get the timing thing down. So can monopolies suffer losses? Yeah, absolutely. So you can see that one is earning profits, average total cost is less than the price, and then over here, ooh, all right, average total cost is greater than the price. Okay, so that is very important. They can. And you're gonna notice also that they're not gonna charge the highest price. They could certainly, because they're the only maker, they can charge higher prices here, can't they? But you're gonna notice they're not looking at their profit per unit, right? Because we could cut back to the third unit here and only produce 3, and we can charge higher prices. But they're certainly not maximizing their total profits there, all right? So what can happen? Why could they then suffer losses? Did you see what I put these two side by side, even though they're not from I don't think they're from the same text, but you can see, what if the demand for the product fell? Does that make sense? In this case, the demand function, which signifies the price that they can charge, that's at that quantity, that's the price that people are going to pay, they're willing and able to pay at that quantity. But if that demand function falls, and I can draw that over here, if we drop the marginal revenue function and the demand function, now it lies below. Well, I didn't get it quite below, did I? Let's try this, marginal revenue. All right, and we have our demand function. Let's go to unit 4. Yeah, I'm still a little bit below, aren't I? Could the monopolist achieve then a normal profit or zero economic profits? They could, couldn't they? I mean, that would be right here, wouldn't it? Okay, so yeah, they can suffer losses. You know, you guys, are you going to have some questions that are really easy like that, where you're going to have A, B, C, D, and it's not all going to be graphs and things? Yeah. Okay, what about rising resource prices? So let's say the demand function lies right there, but what if your resource prices rise? What's going to happen to your cost functions? They're going to shift, aren't they? And they're going to shift upward. All right, so recognize that, you know, some simple stuff like that. Notice here, should the loss-suffering monopoly shut down in the short run here? You tell me. You're going to tell me the answer here now. Should that firm shut down?
No.
No. How come, Pop?
Because it's higher, it's not underneath the average variable.
Exactly. If these shifted high enough, all right, and that average variable cost curve is greater than the price, they can't pay their variables, can they? All right. Okay, so let's do this. All right. There is your deadweight loss that I referred to before. We don't certainly have any dead weight loss, do we, in pure competition? You're maximizing your what? Consumer and producer surplus. Correct? It's maximized. We don't see that with a monopoly. Right? Do you guys see something else here now? They're kind of telling, do you see what they're doing with this graph? This says, you can't see it probably in the back, this says PC, this says PC. So if we look at our rules up here, okay, remember in pure competition, price in the long run, right, the long run equilibrium price is always equal to marginal cost. Okay? What is that again? What type of efficiency? You have to know that.
Yeah,
Right? That's the right mix, allocative efficiency. And we always have prices equal to minimum ATC. And that is always considered what efficiency? Productive. You can think about that. At the very bottom of the average total cost function, I mean, that's as efficient as you can. Every machine, right, is functioning. All labors are to full capacity. So now, have you learned where the perfectly competitive price would be in a monopoly if we compared? And you were looking for what? Allocative efficiency. It's right there. It's right there. Remember, your demand function is going to be the price that they can charge. So do you see where MC is equal then to the demand function there? All right. Now you can see that the monopolist is charging prices higher, all right, than what you would then pay in a monopolistic, in a pure competition structure. Anybody have any issues there at all now that you can see that? All right, so monopolies, you're paying higher prices and less quantity, aren't you? Does that make sense now? Okay, because that you need to know this. I promise you that all of that information will be on there in some capacity. All right. So this is just another way of showing that to you. Now this one's all labeled for you. That's why I wanted to show you that earlier, where it wasn't all labeled. Here's the thing, they won't have it labeled, you understand that? They won't have it labeled. They're not gonna have this PM and PC crap here. You get that? And then you're gonna have to identify, maybe they'll have letters or something here, okay, signifying different things. Okay, does that make sense? Now you can see consumer and producer surplus, and then you can see how that's minimized. And this becomes all the producer surplus. Yep.
Are they gonna have like the MC and MR or no?
Yeah, they'll have all of that for you. They're gonna, but here's, it depends upon the exam. Will all of them be labeled, Pop? Maybe not. They might not be. I take that back, they might not. But everyone in this class now understands, all right, that that's a marginal revenue function. It can go negative. You understand how marginal revenue functions derive from the demand function, correct? You know that this is MR equals MC, so you may have to be able to identify all of that. They don't talk a lot about income transfer here, but I can certainly do that. Same thing we just talked about. Price is not minimum ATC, okay? Remember, in pure competition, we're always going to be producing at the minimum. You'll notice here it's not at minimum ATC. Price is certainly not equal to MC. If price were equal to MC, it would be here. So you're going to notice your price is higher than MC, and you're not at minimum ATC. So you don't have what? You do not have allocative or productive efficiency. Oops, my apologies. I don't know what I did there. Okay. Would you have to do this? Once again, you're limited with time. You don't have a lot of tabular questions like this. But once again, you could certainly do that. You could tell, obviously you can tell us the quantity the firm will produce. You can, if they asked you a question, whether or not the firm was earning a profit, I think you can do that here. I think you can. We know that we're gonna maximize profits at what, MR equals MC. This is the same graph, or not graph, excuse me, table from before. So notice that your marginal revenue of producing this fifth item, once again, is $82. What's your average total cost? All right, $94. What do you think? Earning a profit or a loss? The average total cost of producing the fifth item is $94, but you're bringing in, all right, no, what's the price, you guys? I'm sorry. I didn't want to look at marginal revenue. The average total cost is 94, and what's your price? 122. So are you earning a profit or are you earning a loss?
Profit.
Average total cost of producing that one's 94, the price is 122. What is it?
Profit.
Yep. And would you be able to determine the total amount there? You would. Okay. So you might have something like that. I haven't seen income transfer a lot, even on maybe on AP a little bit. Income transfer is really easy. Okay, I'm going to show you here once. Let's take a look at it. It's right here. So we know this would be the perfectly competitive price. This is the monopoly price. So do you guys see this square right here? This would have been our consumer surplus, right, in a purely competitive market. What if I draw that over there, right? Does that make sense? So what we're doing is we're transferring this amount of income to whom? To the monopolist. Does that make sense? So if I draw this here like this would have been producer surplus. This all would have been consumer surplus. But the fact that they have control over price, they're gonna charge a higher price, a smaller quantity. This amount of consumer surplus goes to whom? Producer. It goes to the producer. That's called income transfer with monopolies. All right, not hard. You just have to kind of look at that stuff. Okay? So let's get rid of this crap. Okay, what do we have here? Cost differs. Oh, I did that again. That's probably not gonna work. Excuse me. Yep, we've already talked about natural monopolies. You can see that average cost is still falling. I don't think there's anything there. You're not gonna see anything on efficiency, I don't think. It's just you guys, hey, they're so profitable. There's so, all right, much money being made. Their average total cost function is not where it should be. I'm gonna do this. Why is that? Nepotism? Do you think that the CEO, all right, of the company can get a job for his cousin or his son or his daughter? Are they the most highly qualified candidates, or do they just know the right people?
They just know the right people.
When you're making a lot of profits, all right, there's some of these massive firms, you guys, that are making a lot of money. Do people get hired that might not be the best people? So then that average total cost function isn't where it should be, should it? That's called inefficiency. Okay, if you run into that. You're gonna have to load a stir. You know, it's akin to regulatory capture, if you see that. Oftentimes we call it rent seeking, because they are so profitable. All right, what rent seeking is it's really bribery. So do you believe that these large corporations that have zero competition or little competition take some of the profits and put it back into lobbyists? So they turn around and they knock on politicians' doors to ensure then that laws favor their existence? That's called rent seeking. Rents, if you ever see the word rents, you guys, for you, rent is what? I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna rent an apartment, right? All right, and we looked at that, oops, I just almost spit on, Zoom. We looked at that in class, remember? We had wages, we have land, labor, capital management, right? Then we have rent, wages, income. Okay, there's another definition, if it's on the test. Economic rents, if they use that terminology, economic rents, that you know what it's like? It's like consumer surplus. Okay? That's what it's like. Do you think that Kevin Durant, all right, would work for less than what he's receiving? Because what's his next best alternative if he wasn't playing basketball? That's what rents are. And so rent seeking is ensuring that the company is receiving high prices and they're driving politics, using profits to influence political outcomes. So they keep what? That price and their profits really high. All right, it's great stuff. Don't have to do a lot with price discrimination. I've never seen on the AP test, or unless you guys come across a question, there's first, second, and third degree price discrimination. You have a different model for each one. I haven't seen that, but I think everybody should know what price discrimination is. That is charging different people different prices for the exact same product. Okay? And a monopolist can perfectly then discriminate. They can. Right? So you need to know what it is. You need to know, in order for this to work, all right, they must have some monopoly power. The firm can separate the buyer due to different elasticities. You want a really good example? A movie theater. It's the only one in town. So can they charge different prices to see the film, the exact same film, all right, to different groups of people? And they're able to segregate them, separate them. Okay? And the product can't be resold. Okay? If you were to sell, for example, popcorn at the movie theater to kids for only $1, but adults $10, you know what's gonna happen? Okay, Talby's gonna then have his kid buy it, and then he's gonna commit arbitrage, and he's gonna stand just down the hallway and make a profit and resell it. Isn't that what all you would do? I only have to buy it for $1, but everybody else has to pay 10. I'll just buy it and resell it. So notice when you're buying your movie ticket, when you're elderly like me and I get a discount, I can't hand that over to you, can I? You're not gonna pass, are you, as an old turd? So those sometimes are on the test. What are the conditions then to, all right, discriminate, and that the monopoly can perfectly discriminate? But I have never seen where you guys have to then identify this on 3 different models. And if it's not on the AP test, and I haven't seen it on any of the past tests, I doubt that that would ever, all right, be on a CLEP test. But you're all smart, we went through this earlier. We did this earlier when we were looking at price elasticity of demand, correct? All right. If the elasticity of demand is certainly more elastic, we can lower those prices, can't we, and increase our revenue. Right? Coupons. When it's highly inelastic, you know, obviously then you can raise prices and you can increase your revenue. So you guys know that. We've already done that. All right. Now this will be on there probably. So pay close attention to this now. So we have the natural monopoly. Do we allow them to exist? Yes. All right. It would be easier for one firm to produce at a lower cost than a bunch of competing firms. We could look at electricity. We could look at Ma Bell. We could look at these examples. We could look at a nuclear power plant. The question then becomes, what should government do in terms of regulation? Now, this is a really important graph here. Can everybody see now, if we were in pure competition, what would the price be? And I'm really glad that you can't see these letters on the side, but I want you to give me the answer on the bottom. Don't look at price. Let's not ask you what price they should charge, all right? In a perfectly competitive market, what quantity, what would be the output? Give me the quantity. We're gonna call this Q1, Q2, and Q3. What would be the correct quantity? Yep, Kickster, you have it, bud? You're saying 1, anybody else? In pure competition, what would be the quantity? What did we say in pure competition? The right mix allocated efficiency, where P is equal to MC. So where would that be? Right here, because our demand function represents the price they can charge, right there. Quantity 3 would be what we would receive as a quantity in pure competition. Okay, there's only one problem with regulating the firm at that price and that quantity. Does anybody see what the problem is? I'm gonna give you a second. What's the problem with you guys regulating the firm at that price? Yeah, Kickster?
The price of the product is below the average total cost.
They're operating at a loss, aren't they? Yeah. Did you guys see that? The price that they're gonna charge is below the average total cost.
Morning, students and staff. Just a reminder to our sophomores who are testing today, if
see
you are
that there?
testing this morning, please make sure you eat first
not good, is
breakfast. Second chance breakfast will not be available for you. If you
So-
are testing in the afternoon, sophomores, please make sure you eat first lunch. Thank you.
All right, so what is fair return pricing then? What do you think you're gonna price that then? 1, 2, or 3? This is where the monopolist would charge, right? MR equals MC, does everybody see, isn't that profit maximization? They would charge this price. But we're gonna regulate it, it's a natural monopoly, they're the only one, okay? It's obviously what? What's fair return? It's at 2, but why?
Goes to the price, ATC discount,
What is your price equal to now?
ATC.
ATC, price is equal to the average total cost of producing it. So what profit would they be earning? Zero economic profit, wouldn't they? Remember, your cost functions include explicit and implicit costs. Does everybody understand that now? Without going through all of this, you can read through the notes, but that's what that means.
So you can operate at 0.
That we're gonna set the price where the firm is operating, all right, at zero economic profit. That's called fair return pricing.
And that's for not
Alright.
just pure competition.
Pardon?
Is that for all of them?
For a monopoly. If you price at where the purely competitive price would be, you'll notice that it lies below. That just shows you, all right, in pure competition, price is equal to, that's the right mix, all right? Now remember, productive efficiency would be where price is equal to ATC. Now, it's not minimum, but it's equal to the ATC, so they're just covering their cost of production. That's what that means. So let's do this.
Would Ella Stafford,
No,
Carly
you guys.
Giesinger, Carly
Okay.
Mew, Clay Horder, Jaden Merrill come to the office, also
Normally-
Ellie Blair.
I know the graphs are gonna look confusing here and stuff, but try not to make this too hard right now. We also wanna look, there's questions like this, okay? You gotta please listen to me. It's not gonna be hard, but you just gotta know what's going on here, okay? So we said fair return pricing is P equal to ATC, okay? Now, how are you gonna get there? How are you gonna set this up? So if we tax them, do you wanna do a lump sum tax, or do you wanna do, for example, we've talked about this in here, tax them per then output. Now economists are gonna favor the lump sum tax. Now there's trade-offs and stuff, okay? You're gonna notice if it's a lump sum tax, automatically, if you're a monopoly, you just have to pay it. Is that a variable expense, or is that a fixed expense then? It's fixed. That is the key thing here. So what that does is that doesn't affect your marginal cost function. Marginal cost is a change in your variables, right? Fixed costs are costs when what? We're producing nothing. So if they have a lump sum tax, what that does is that just shifts the average cost, the average total cost function up. Now notice what happens here then. This is your marginal revenue, marginal cost that we're gonna maximize the profits for the firm. Now this would have been their profits, wouldn't it? See that? But now if they have a lump sum tax, look at what happens to their profits. Is there any change in output? No. Is there any change in price? No. But it cuts their profits, doesn't it? Does that make sense? So you guys can look at all of these implications, all right? And you can draw and you can look here. That's the key thing though, okay? Now AP, I mean, we would go into this in full detail, but in the CLEP test, it doesn't seem to get that way. If you were to charge an excise tax, we've talked about a tax per item that you produce. Notice now that it's gonna shift both the average cost function and marginal cost function. So what happens then is our marginal cost, marginal revenue function, it changes our output, doesn't it? We're gonna produce less, society will get less of the product if you're gonna have an excise tax. And then also, does it increase prices? I'm telling you, that's a question a lot of times. You're gonna see that in your practice test too, lump sum tax or maybe excise taxes and regulating monopolies. That's a wrap, baby. Why are they so rare? They're profitable. Does it drive other people to try and get into the business? Yeah. So let's do this. I wanna just get you started on it, all right? How do I get back here? I want to get you started on this. What we do next then is the old MC. And guess what? Make sure you get your easy questions right. All right? You need to know your characteristics here, and I think everybody knows what they are. There's some barriers to entry, but they're small. It's where most things are made, right? And what's the big difference between PC and monopolistic competition? Not all the products are the same. Monopolistic competition means what? It's highly competitive, but you have a little bit of a monopoly because you can differentiate. They're not coming in.
With Ella Stassen, Carly Giesinger, Clay Harder, Jaden Merrill.
You're gonna have to know this. You're gonna see this. All right, the four firm concentration
Reminder to
ratio
sophomores, if
or
you
the
are testing this
Herfindahl-Hirschman
morning, you
index.
need to eat breakfast
They will
now
be on the test
before
and they're
going to
easy
the testing.
questions. How do we determine an oligopoly from monopolistic competition? There's two ways in which government kind of measures that. Here's how easy it is, okay? The four firm concentration ratio, you're just looking at their market share and you simply add the stinking numbers up and you're gonna look at the percentage of the total market. So there's your top four terms. Did I say terms? Firms, okay, my apologies. And this is their market share. We add it up and we look at what's that percent share relative to the total market. Notice what I have down here. If the four firm market concentration ratio is less than 40%, it's gonna be MC. It's monopolistic competition. The other item that you have is the Herfindahl-Hirschman index. It seems like there's always a question on this dang thing, and it's super easy. All you're gonna do, all right, is you are going to sum the squared market shares of all firms. If you have 5 firms in the industry, and they each have 20% of the market share, just square it. So this would be 400 plus 400 plus 400 plus 400, 400, 2,000. Do you think that that's a highly concentrated market? Is that just a few firms? That's oligopoly, isn't it? And those values are, all right, anything from 1,800 to 10,000 then would be an oligopoly. It's highly concentrated. Pretty simple. One of the questions I always seem that shows up, all right, what's the highest Herfindahl index number? It would be 10,000 because if there was only one firm and we're going to square this, what does that equal?
10,000.
10,000. That seems to be on there all the time. Okay. Here's just some examples of that. Now, does the Marginal, excuse me, does the monopolistic competition firm and the monopoly firm, all right, are they gonna look kind of the same? They are. They both have a downward sloping demand function. But how do you know that one of these is a monopoly and one of these is monopolistic competition? But both of them are gonna have marginal revenue functions that are gonna do this. There'll be 1/2 the distance, okay, in the middle here. What is the difference here?
But they can't set the price.
You can't set the price, but what's the difference between the two graphs, the downward sloping demand and marginal revenue functions? If they have that on the test, which is a monopoly, how would you identify the two? They're not gonna have this. Which of the two functions would best represent a monopoly versus monopolistic competition? How would you know that? Come on, you guys. Isn't this much more inelastic? When you have more substitutes, what happens to the demand function elasticity? Right, did we talk about that? What are your factors of elasticity? Does that make sense now? Okay, this is really easy tomorrow, MC. Because we just went through it with Monopoly, and it'll take me just 5 minutes maybe to do oligopolies, that's it. And then we can start some other stuff tomorrow. What do you think, you guys? Not bad?